Okay, hi guys. I hope that week one went well for you. I hope it was pretty straightforward. I hope you submitted your assignment and did that quiz on Sunday. That's when it was due. If you didn't, it's okay. Go ahead and get that in when you can. But I hope you did do that, so moving forward you feel caught up and empowered to stay on track with what we're gonna do these next, I guess now 7 weeks. Last week, we talked about online disagreements, online arguments. We sort of briefly looked at team policy and congressional style debating because we are going to be pulling from those styles of debate in order to conduct a virtual debate online via eCampus. And so this week, we're doing some more of that groundwork that we need in order to do that virtual debate. So, real quick, the virtual debate, you will research a bill or a resolution that's related to a topic that you are personally really passionate about, something that you are interested in. Then you're gonna have to write a sponsorship speech, which is essentially a position paper, a speech that explains why other people should also support whatever it is you're supporting in that bill or in that resolution. And you're gonna post that in the discussion board. You're gonna either be able to post that just like in a long essay form or a video version of you doing it. And then the following week, your peers are gonna get a chance to respond, to either agree or disagree with your position on that bill or that resolution. And then in the final week of this quarter, you guys are gonna sort of reflect on how your position might have shifted or how it might have just been re-solidified based on the feedback or criticism you were getting from your peers. So before we do that, we have to know what the who-ham a bill or a resolution is, right? So that is what we are gonna be talking about this week, or rather that's what you are gonna be learning about this week based on the activities that I've structured. And so I think this week is pretty fun because it lets you guys learn what you need to get out of this week in order to be really successful in the virtual debate and gain some of those skills that we're really focused on this quarter, which are ethical communication, your research skills, your argumentation skills, your cognitive empathy, your ability to give constructive criticism. Like those are all outcomes that we're driving towards this quarter. And the type of debate that we're doing is going to facilitate the development of those skills. But in order to do that debate, we have to have an understanding of bills and resolutions, because next week when you start looking at when you start looking for specific bills and resolutions that you're interested in, you have to have an understanding of what it would mean for that bill to be passed. How would that bill be passed? What would it mean for that bill to be passed? You have to understand really sort of what the significance of a resolution is, if there is any significance to a resolution. So we have to know those things before we get to next week, right? So that is what you're gonna be doing. This is step 1, watching this video. Then you're gonna be watching the I'm Just a Bill video. If you haven't seen the I'm Just a Bill, I'm just a bill, that video, then you are now going to be graced with one of the if you have not watched the I'm Just a Bill video, then you will do that this week and you will know the more for it. That bill does a beautiful job of explaining how a bill becomes a law, and it shows in a way that really sticks in your mind all the hurdles a bill must go through and really how vetted a bill has to be in order to make it to the president's desk and be signed into law. A bill starts in the House of Representatives. It's on a docket. It then has to be brought to committee. The head of a committee in the House of Representatives has to deem this bill worthy enough to even talk about with the committee members. In committee, that bill might get marked up. Things are going to be changed in the bill. It might go through committee numerous times before it even gets to a House vote, meaning the members of the House get to then vote on the bill. Sometimes bills never even make it out of committee. Like when that bill is in committee, they think that bill really isn't worth pursuing, and then it's dead at that stage. Sometimes it does make it through committee and then it gets to a vote in the House and then it's also dead, the vote fails and then it goes back if someone is willing to revisit it and rework it, or they just abandon it. But if it does make it through the House vote, it then goes to the Senate. But that process happens all over again. So the House votes on a bill. Sometimes you hear about it in the news, right? The House voted on this bill. And then people think like it's a law. It's not, because now it has to go to the Senate, and the Senate has to do that entire process all over again that bill just experienced in the House. I guess a bill can experience things because it's just a bill, but it's just a bill. But yeah, so it has to go through that entire process again. So a bill might go through the House, be voted on, and then get to the Senate and go to committee and then be dead in a Senate committee, or it might go through the Senate and then fail in the Senate vote. So if a bill really makes it through the House and the Senate, it's really been through the ringer as far as getting vetted. It doesn't mean that it's still popular. You could still have a really partisan vote, right? You could still have the margins on that vote be really, really narrow, because the bills typically only have to pass with a simple majority, right? But if it does pass, it then goes to the president's desk, where the president then signs it into law. A president can veto a bill. And I'm sure you can imagine many reasons why a president might veto a bill, right? Maybe the parties that control the House of Representatives and the Senate aren't the party that the president is a part of, right? And maybe the majority is super, super thin. So when that bill passed the House of Representatives and when that bill passed in the Senate, it passed with really thin margins, right? And the president isn't a fan of the bill, right? So then he vetoes the bill. And if a bill gets vetoed, it can still be moved, it can still become a law if it goes back through the House and the Senate and gets a 2/3 majority vote. A 2/3 majority vote is a lot more difficult, right? So if a bill went through the House and through the Senate and then gets vetoed on the president's desk, how likely is it that it's going to get a 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate? It can happen, right? But more than likely, it would take a lot of legwork, and it would take a lot of reworking of the bill, which is sometimes why that veto happens, right? The president says, no, you didn't consult with the opposing party enough. You didn't consult with my party enough. This bill is not popular. It's only popular within one party. So we're going to send it back, and you're going to have to work across the aisle and get this bill to a place where a larger majority approves of this bill, right? So that's a bill. That's how a bill becomes a law. Resolutions, simple and concurrent resolutions, are a little bit different. Simple and concurrent resolutions do not have the force of law. So a simple resolution is a resolution that would be brought either in the House or in the Senate. A concurrent resolution is a resolution that applies to both, essentially. It's both houses are making this resolution. That's the only difference. So I'm just going to say resolution to keep it simple, to keep it easy, but there are two types of resolutions. There is a third type of resolution called a joint resolution. But a joint resolution is far more similar to a bill than it is to the other resolutions, because joint resolutions are how you amend the Constitution, and they do have the force of the law. So joint resolutions have the force of the law, can amend the Constitution, and ultimately get signed by the president because they have the force of law. So bills and joint resolutions have the force of law. The president signs those into law. That's how you make laws that can then be enforced. Resolutions, simple and concurrent resolutions, don't have that. They don't have the force of the law. They never have to make it to the president's desk for him to sign. Resolutions are the House and the Senate's way of sort of issuing guidance sometimes. There might be a governmental agency that they really can't direct they really can't direct them to take any action on something beyond giving them money. That's really how Congress does influence the other governmental agencies, right? They can't necessarily write the rules for those agencies because those agencies actually have jurisdiction over their interpretation of the rules. But what the House and the Senate can do is control the money, right? They have the purse. There's the Ways and Means Committee, and they they sort of dole out the money. The stimulus package that just passed made its way through the Ways and Means Committee because they hold the purse. They're in charge of figuring out where the money is going to go, where it's going to come from. That's really the only way that the House and the Senate can issue guidance on what agencies can do. So if the House thinks that certain governmental agencies should be spending some more time focusing on natural medicines. I'm making this up. They can't pass a bill that says you have to focus on natural medicines, right? They can't do that. They might pass a bill that allocates certain funding for that, right? Because they can control that. But they can't just write a bill and pass into law something that says you have to focus on natural medicines, right? What they can do is issue or pass a resolution that says that that this House is supporting this. We are suggesting that this agency do that. That is what a resolution can do. And so resolutions are passed all the time. All things. Resolutions are for things that you wouldn't necessarily sign into law. A law isn't really the place for that. Granted, if the House wanted to allocate funds, right, to implement the celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month, that would then be a bill, right? Because we're talking about the allocation of funds, and that is something that is done through the force of law. But as far as just sort of expressing an opinion and considering something and suggesting that all applicable agencies and organizations also recognize this, that is what a resolution is for. And in a resolution, you list all the reasons that we should be recognizing Hispanic Heritage Month at a federal and at a national level. And so you give your reasons, and then it is agreed to in the House, and then that's the resolution. And so resolutions also have a far easier way of seeing their way to the end of that process, ultimately because it's not a law, right? So because a resolution is not law binding, it isn't going to, the vetting process for it isn't as rigorous, because ultimately a resolution only has the force if enough people in the public and in those agencies want to abide by that resolution. Resolutions are also really great for the House or for the Senate to condemn an action, right? So if the House or the Senate maybe disagrees with what the executive branch is doing in a foreign country or in some sort of international dispute, and maybe the House and the Senate, who represent the American people, right? We elect those individual people. Maybe someone from our district will, they'll go and they'll introduce a resolution that condemns the actions of whoever. Maybe another country. Maybe we want to go out of our way to really make sure that on a national scale, other countries understand that the United States does condemn something that happened. So the House might pass a resolution that says, this House condemns the actions of insert country, right? So that's another way that they might use resolutions. I will insert a visual of a resolution, and you'll see that it's structured differently than a bill, which you'll see in a second. It says whereas, resolved, it ends with resolved. And a bill looks a little bit different because a bill has sections, it has a place for the penalties, it has a place for what the title of the bill is, it possibly clarifies any words so that it's really clear. It asks where the money is coming from to enforce the bill, who is going to enforce the bill or who's going to enforce the law. And so the bill looks different than a resolution. So this week, you are going to watch that I'm Just a Bill video, right? You're going to look at this. I made a table that sort of shows the difference between a bill and a simple and concurrent resolution. And actually, I'll insert that right here real quick, but it's also on eCampus, so you will be able to see it there. And then really where most of your learning is going to happen is in the week 2 assignment. So your week 2 assignment is going to be a discussion posting. But what you're posting is your own bill or your own resolution. So you will see everything you need on eCampus. But essentially, you are going to propose a bill or a resolution that is as insane, wacky, unrealistic, or super realistic, super enforceable, something that you might actually hear. It can, on that entire spectrum, it can be super bizarre and insane and weird and funny and comical, or it could be super serious and something that you actually think would be realistic and something that should be done. Anywhere on that spectrum, your bill or your resolution can be. You're just gonna pick one, a bill or a resolution. And it obviously has to be appropriate. If it's not appropriate, then I will, number one, delete it. Number two, you won't get credit for it. And number three, I will contact you and probably your parents. So let's not do that. Okay? Let's just avoid that. You will see that I have some, I wrote examples of a bill and a resolution. So that's the first part, is that you are going to write a bill or a resolution. On eCampus, on the assignment, you will see that there is a template for a bill and a template for a resolution. You will also see that there is an example of a bill and an example of a resolution. That should be enough for you to see what yours should look like. After you have done that part, which is due on Friday, it's Friday the 10th. That is due on Friday the 10th. Once you have posted your bill or your resolution, remember you're doing one or the other, a bill or a resolution. After you do that, and you post that on Friday, you are going to respond to 2 of your peers, but you're gonna use the yes and protocol. It might sound something like this, okay? Let's say I propose in my bill or my resolution. Well, this would be a bill. Let's say I propose in my bill that all Americans must rescue a cat or be fined $100. That's like my bill. That's like the summary of my bill. Like just really briefly, that's what my bill is gonna do. The actual bill is gonna be like longer, but that's my bill. So someone who is like, yes, that should, I agree. You're not gonna be like, I agree. You're gonna say, yes, and the bill should propose that residents rescue. Phoebe agrees. Phoebe, come here. Come here. Phoebe, come here. She just wants to interrupt, but she doesn't want to say hi. Someone who agrees with that might say, yes, and the bill should propose that residents rescue 2 cats instead of 1, and that all owners must build elaborate cat patios for their new pets. Right? So you're like, I agree with that, and here's how you can make it better, right? But you don't just have to agree, right? You could disagree, but you're still gonna use the yes and protocol. So you might say something like, yes, and the fine will be unenforceable since some people are allergic to cats, and forcing people to own cats is an infringement on their right to life, right? So you might be like, okay, interesting idea, and here's how I'm gonna amend your idea so that it is maybe more realistic, right? So you might not agree with the cat thing, but the key here is that you can't simply just say, no, I disagree because like, I don't like cats, right? You have to say, yes, and here's how I'm going to amend your proposed bill or resolution so that it doesn't have the force of law, or so that it isn't as intense or as maybe controlling, or so that it is maybe more considerate of other people's views or experiences, right? So that's really the key there. That's the only way you can answer yes and then fill in the blank. So that is your assignment for this week. So due this Friday is your bill or your resolution. Again, there are examples on eCampus. There's an example of a bill and an example of a resolution that I made. Okay, they're buckets. There's also a template for a bill and a template for a resolution. When you post, you wanna, in your post, write just like a brief summary of what your bill or your resolution is, just like maybe like 1 or 2 sentences, or 2 or 3 sentences. And then you wanna attach your document so that it keeps that formatting, because that's also crucial. When you go off to go find bills and resolutions that you're interested in, you want to be able to know how to read it, and so it's important that we all upload documents that follow the template and follow what that looks like, so that when we go to the part where we're reading these bills and resolutions, you're literate in that, and that is less confusing for you than it would be otherwise. What? You can jump up there. Come here. Okay. So that is due on Friday. Due on Sunday night are your 2 responses to 2 different peers. So you respond once to one peer and once to another peer, and you use that yes and protocol. You say yes and then add to that bill or that resolution. So the first part requires you to write your own bill or resolution, and the second part requires you to read 2 other people's bills or resolutions and comment and add and be critical of it using that yes and protocol, okay? After you've done that, there is a really brief quiz. It's 5 questions. One of the questions asks you to sort of like detail the difference between a bill and a resolution, and then the other 4 questions are fill in the blanks where it says something like a blank to do this, and it wants you to fill in, is this a bill to do something or a resolution to do something? So you're gonna have to distinguish the language. So is it saying we suggest, we honor, we recognize, or is it saying we mandate, we allocate, right? And so hopefully by the time you get to the quiz, you have a better feel for what a bill and for what a resolution is. And the whole goal here is that next week, when we go into the part where we're going to start looking at our own interests and start researching bills and resolutions, you feel really confident about what they are, what their purpose is, how they function within our government, and you feel empowered to read them and to understand them and to be able to then, in the following week, go on and write your own position on how you feel about that and why other people should agree with it. Okay, that is really all. If you have any questions, you can email me. You can call the Google Voice number on the Sci-Hi Virtual Learning homepage. I said email, I did. You can show up to our virtual meeting, which I highly suggest. I loved last week getting to hang out with you guys and talk with you guys and try to replicate a little bit of what our classroom culture and environment was virtually. So we meet on Mondays and Thursdays at 9 o'clock until 10 o'clock. Seek out your friends, seek their advice, and I will see you, hopefully. Seriously, I would love if all of you guys showed up to our web conference. I will hopefully see you this Monday at 9 or this Thursday at 9.